And welcome back to the show, everybody. My name is Shane, and I'm here with Mark.
Hey.
And we are the Fantasy Football Pros. So today we are on part 3 of our Fantasy Football for Dummies by Dummies. And this week we're talking about free agents, waivers, and trades.
And this is a four-part series that we're doing. This week is about the free agents, waivers, and trades. Next week, we'll wrap it all up into what we feel is a winning draft strategy.
You can do us a favor if you're enjoying our content. Please subscribe, like, or comment to our podcast. It just helps out with our show. You can follow us on Twitter at the Pros FF and Instagram at the Fantasy Football Pros for any extra content. You can also submit any questions via Twitter or at our website at www.thefantasyfootballpros.com.
Hey, by the way, before you jump in, Shane,
Yeah.
what do you? This is off the tangent, but how do you feel about the Supreme Court ruling in favor of athletes in the NCAA that they should be getting paid?
I think that they should be getting paid. Absolutely. I mean, everyone around them is gaining profit off of them, but the kids aren't getting paid. Doesn't really make sense. And not, a lot of them don't make it into the pros. So they're not going to be getting paid at all.
And the other thing is the athletes that they are bringing in aren't necessarily going to get the college degree either, because people this is my feeling, people say about it, say, hey, they're getting a free college education. They're going to get a college degree when they're done out of there. Most of them, no.
Yeah, it's very, very rare, actually. Like the really, really intelligent ones seem to get a degree and then go into the NFL or whatnot. And they just have like that safety net when they do retire,
Yeah. And I do believe also this might actually keep them in school longer, where maybe you get those kids staying longer and getting the degree, because if they're getting some sort of payment from it, and if they're in a really bad financial situation where they, I don't even have money for a Big Mac, you know what I'm saying, that this could help them stay in that college setting an extra year, develop better, and also
get that education.
Yeah, better education. So I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, I just wanted to see
keep them in school and get the education.
Yep.
And if they have to, if they get an injury and have to retire early, have something to lay back on. I just wanted to say, I don't even know if I'll put this in the show, but I just read that Tom Brady heard that some team was passing on him, like last season. And this is on Hard Knocks for HBO.
Okay.
And it was quoted that he said, they're sticking with that shit guy.
Uh-oh. And which team was this? Do we know what team it was?
They have not said, but it airs this Friday. But you don't know if they're actually going to say who the team is, who the quarterback is.
I bet it comes out as Tennessee.
No.
Everything this year it's all about Tennessee. No, I wonder
who had a good offense, but I guess in Brady's eyes, a bad quarterback.
You know what? It really could have been the Bears before they picked up Justin Fields, when Andy Dalton was their savior.
No, this would have been before last season, so it would have been Mitch Trubisky.
Oh, okay. Well, then it really could have been the Bears, because Trubisky was a shit guy. Well, maybe not a shit guy, but a shit quarterback.
Yeah, but we really didn't have I don't think a solid offense. That Brady would just be surprised, they're just going to stick with him and not go for me.
Now it's got me thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go down through the list. Okay, who's got a decent offense with a shit quarterback?
I can probably name a few. Interesting, though.
Anywho, yeah, it's gonna be interesting what comes out of that, if that ever comes out, who he was talking about.
It is funny, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start off with waivers. Now, when a player is dropped from a team, they enter what is called waivers, which is a grace period that a player cannot be picked up by any team. Instead, all the teams get to use their waiver priorities to select the players. In the beginning of the season, depending on your league settings, each team is given a waiver priority number, one being the highest priority. And typically that's if you are the last pick in the first round of the draft, you would get the number one priority. Or some leagues do it where they base it off of your league rank. So it'll start after week 1, and the team that is the lowest ranked out of everybody will get the number one priority. After the waiver wire grace period, all the players selected by teams will be passed along depending on the waiver priority. So let's say that Team A and Team B both select the same player. Team A has the number one priority and Team B has the number two. Team A will get the player, then Team A waiver priority numbers will go down to the very bottom of the list until another team picks up a player off of waivers. Then, instead of Team B picking up that said player, they would instead select a player that was second on their own list if they selected one.
Yeah, and they would get him because they would now have the highest priority.
Correct. And most leagues, with my understanding, you can only have 3 players selected.
It's kind of like that auto draft, when you set up an auto draft.
Yeah. You set it, you go to bed, you wake up and see if anything happened.
Did you get one of those 3 players or did you get none of those 3 players?
Yeah. So now we'll go into some strategies with the waiver wire. When you make a waiver move, unless you have an available roster spot on your team, you will need to select a player to drop. Now, if you really want 2 players, this is what you do. You select your favorite player with your first priority while you're selecting a player to drop. Let's say it's player A. Then with your second selection, you pick up a different player while still selecting player A to drop. Then with your third selection, you go to pick up that same second player, but now you're going to select a different player to drop, like player B. And this is the strategy. So you're going for the main guy, and you're selecting, the worst player on your team that you don't want. If that goes through, then that second waiver move that I told you to make will be neglected and it'll go to the third, and then you'll be going for that your second player while dropping a different guy.
Dropping a different guy, exactly.
Now let's say your first move did not go through. Now, instead of keeping the worst player on your team because that move didn't go through, now you're selecting player B and still selecting your worst player.
And that's your second option, which if the first option did go through, the second option would be null and void.
Yeah. So it's just like a safety net. So in my opinion, it's best to go for 2 players with having only 3 moves and using that strategy. And
yes.
You're utilizing your roster the best that you can. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a solid plan, because really you want to get rid of this guy on your team, but you're giving yourself 2 options to get 2 different players to get for that guy.
Yeah.
And that is the way to do it, instead of saying, okay, if this doesn't work, all of a sudden you're putting a lot of people, what they do is they put a second waiver selection in there and they use a whole different player. And now they're getting rid of a player on their team that might have been viable.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that. You want to get rid of the dumpster fire.
Or let's say there's 3 players that you're interested in getting. You do not have a high waiver priority number, so you're not really sure on your chances of getting any of them. But there's one player on your team that you definitely know that you don't want anymore. Like, this player is trash. You want him off your team. So then you'd be selecting 3 players, and the player that you're dropping is that same guy. Like, you're only going to get one player, and you're just going to keep on trying to drop that one guy. Like, he's the only one that you want off your team. You want to keep everybody else. You just want to replace him. That's the way you do it. And then the other 2 moves would just be voided out. So you're only going to make one move, which would be your top priority.
Yes. No, I agree. I think that's a very good strategy. Now, when we're talking about these strategies and we're talking about getting rid of the worst guy in the league on your team, do not forget, if this is in the first couple of weeks of the season, don't get rid of that young guy that you drafted because he's not playing yet. Don't panic. If you did your homework for your draft and there's a player you really like that you think is going to be taking over at some point or starting becoming more viable at some point, don't just drop him. You see it every year where someone will drop these rookies that they drafted in this, 7th, 8th round, and they drop them before letting them get a chance to get their feet wet. Not a good move to do that.
The only time you'll do that if they're just buried in the depth chart and there's like no chance that they're going to come out. But most of the time, rookies, If they're not starting, then they're like right there. They're back up. They're just learning the ropes, learning the team until they surpass the starter.
But then again, if your draft strategy to begin with, if player evaluation is wrong, well, then you're screwed anyway.
If you think it is very unlikely that the player that you want will be selected off of waivers, you can find the time that waiver moves go into effect and select the player that you want right after that said time.
Yeah, no, it's like waiting for that last minute to pay your bill online before you get that late fee.
But you're waiting for that late fee. So,
Yes.
so I know for us, it's about 3 or 4 in the morning. And if I am still awake, like around that time, I will like wait for the waivers to go through and then select my guys and then go to bed.
Yep.
And I like pulling that move. That it only works if you're a night owl and the waivers go through it that late.
Or if you're an early riser and you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning, you're doing it then before everybody else is up also.
So that strategy, why you'd want to do that, because after all the teams make their waiver moves, all the players that get moved into free agency, which is when anyone can pick them up at any time. Doesn't cost you a thing. And importantly, it will not cost you your waiver priority. Will not be affected at all. If anything, it'll go up because other players are using their waiver priorities to grab their players. So like it kind of keeps your spot in mind, if not gain a little further edge, so that when that breakout player does happen that week, then you have a better chance of getting them.
Well, and doing it that way, if you're not using up your waiver or waiver priority, and if you're just waiting for that player at 3 in the morning to still be there, that's great because then when it comes to a player that really everybody wants and you got the higher waiver priority, that really helps out at that point if you didn't use it earlier.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another strategy is to get ahead of the league. Notice the start of the changing of the guards. So you want to pick up a player you think is due for a breakout week. Maybe it's a starting running back that fumbled a couple times, losing faith from the coaches, or isn't gaining that much ground while the backup running back actually looks more explosive. If you have the roster spot available, maybe you should pick up that player now before everyone is fighting for him after the breakout week. And if you don't have a feel when those players are going to be breaking out, you can always listen to our show. We will be giving out our weekly list for waivers when the season starts. Any bit of news that we feel is relevant, that like, okay, this guy's going to be starting over that guy, given a couple weeks, you can just see the writing on the wall. We'll let you know. You can make that move if you have the roster spot.
Now, some helpful hints on this. Some things that you can do when you have your team roster and where your team's at, what who plays for what team. You can start following those teams on Instagram. You can also follow beat writers for those teams. So when there's any breaking news or any kind of news that you think is relevant, you're reading the tea leaves, okay? You're reading what the coach is saying, you're reading what the writers are saying because they're talking to the players, they're talking to the coaches. They have information that might not come out for a while, but they already have it and they're talking about it in their show or in their articles. That's If you have the time to do that, that is a great way to stay up on the rest of your league is by looking at these things and trying to decide, like you said, Shane talks about all the time, coach speak. That's just coach speak, or those are the things you have to read into what they're saying. So the more information you read, the more information you listen to, and again, we'll keep you up onto it. We're staying up on all the different teams, trying to stay up on what the coaches are saying to give you this information. But you can get it more in real time if you're doing this on your own also.
And another thing that to watch out for when we talk about coach speak, that could be like, a reporter asked the head coach, "What do you think of your rookie running back?" And they're like, "Oh, that guy looks amazing. He could definitely start for any team in the NFL." That doesn't mean he's going to be starting for their team. He's just saying that he's a really good running back. Like they say things like that all the time, or they say our plan is to give him 20 plus touches a game. Like that's great. That's your plan, but it doesn't mean that's what you're actually going to do. Because if it doesn't work, you're not going to do it.
some coaches will say, and my ears perk up on this or something, is like, we really like the opportunities we've given him, and he's really came through in the opportunities we've given him. We need to find this guy. We have to find this guy some more ball time. That type of stuff. When they're
I
like,
hate that one.
yeah, but you know what I'm saying? But when they're pointing out to, when we've given him the opportunity, he's performed. Those are the type of things you start listening to, because that means the coaches are noticing that, yeah, when we're given the opportunity starting to happen, that might be an indicator, hey, this is the time to pick this guy up before other people do, before they actually do give him that opportunity. And then he, shows some great promise. Now everybody in the league wants him.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just reading the tea leaves. That's all you can say.
All right, now we'll get into one of the, I think, most fun things about fantasy football. We're going to be talking about trades. So you're probably asking yourself, when and how do you pull off a trade? Trading in fantasy football can be extremely fun and or stressful depending on your success.
Or you walk away if you're trying to trade with Shane saying, what a dick.
Thanks, Mark.
No problem. Hey, anytime.
When do you want to trade? I'd say almost always. Throughout the entire season, all you're trying to do is make your team stronger. In the first half of the season, your priority is most likely to have a really strong overall team with depth. But towards the end of the season, you want to start narrowing down your team down to an extremely strong starting lineup. And when the playoffs start, it's one and done. And your bench will provide you nothing unless you get an injury, and it's just that safety net. While having that safety in case of an injury is good to have, you can trade some of that depth away to gain a stronger starting core, then your team should be better off, which is a strategy I use every single year. Getting towards the half part of the season, I will start trading away like all my depth, like my backup quarterback, backup tight ends, anyone that's not, in my opinion, like my best players, gone.
And you're looking for teams, when you're looking for trading partners, you're looking for teams that are struggling in a specific area. Maybe it's quarterback. Maybe their quarterback's gotten hurt. Maybe it's wide receiver. Maybe it's running back. You're looking for what their weakness is. So when you're offering them your backup, and it's going to be his starter, so that way he's getting value for that, because he needs that position, he needs that starting position, and this player A wasn't your starting lineup. Well, maybe you can swap different starting lineups. You're giving him someone was on your reserve, on your bench, for someone that's starting on their team that could start on your team.
So we'll go into some more strategies here. Now, there are a few ways you can pull off a trade, but going about it the wrong way can lead others to not want to trade with you. You always want to gain an edge whenever you pull off a trade. Otherwise, why would you be doing a trade? So offering someone slightly lower than the player you're trying to obtain is a good strategy. However, if the offer is too low, then they will always think you are just trying to rip them off. And if you lose the faith of other managers, then they can just write you off completely.
Oh, because trust us, when you're getting caught trying to rip someone else off, that other owner is texting all the owners. Do you believe what this jerk was trying to do? Are we that? Do you really think we're that stupid? I'm not going to trade. I'm not even going to deal with him anymore. That's what starts going around the league.
Yeah, and it's become, hey, you know that guy Lewis? Yeah, don't bother trading with him. He's just going to try to rip you off. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then once you get that text message, you're like, I'm not dealing with you. This is what I do throughout the season is, you look at free agents to see players that are available, but most likely to get your team better, it's going to be on somebody else's roster. So what you want to do is take a look at your team and see your strengths and weaknesses. So let's say you have a good amount of talented wide receivers, but you're lacking at running back. So you want to take a look at other teams that are the exact opposite. So teams that are in extreme need of wide receivers and have a good amount of running back depth. And then you guys can easily work something out because you're helping each other. You both have players that the other team wants and needs.
And I can't stress this enough. A good trade is good for both parties. When you have a reputation of coming up with good trades that help both parties, it's not about getting one over on somebody. It's really not. That's not what you want to do, because then you get that reputation of, well, they're always going to get the best of you, that they're always looking to get the upper hand. Shane, did you ever see the movie with Kevin Costner, and when he was out west, and he's the
Yes, he was a card shark. I forgot what it
no
was called.
no 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 no.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was Mel Gibson.
That was Mel Gibson in Maverick, dickhead. Uh, no, Dances with Wolves.
Oh yeah.
Okay. There's a point in the movie where Kevin Costner loses his hat in the field of trying to hunt these buffaloes. The one Indian took the hat and thought it was his now. But the tribal council got together and said, no, 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 no. You have to give him something of equal value, basically. And so he gave him his decorative chest protector. And they all said, good trade, good trade. That's what you want to do. You're giving up something of value for value. And it's maybe that the thing you're giving up of value isn't value to you. It's just value to you in a trade situation. But it could be of a value to the other team because they need that position filled. So that's really what you want. You want a good trade. You want good trade.
Yeah, and if you do pull off like good trades with other people, then they're going to want to continue to trade with you because they're like, oh, well, it worked out last time and my team's better. You're not trying to rip me off. Like, I trust what you're saying, because a lot of the times when you're doing a trade, you're really just trying to convince the other guy that this is a fair trade.
Now, last year, Shane, well, tell them the story when you and I traded for the first time last year.
I don't remember what you offered me, but it instantly pissed me off. I believe you were trying to get Jonathan Taylor, and you offered me like two backup running backs and like some subpar wide receiver, something like that. And I instantly text you back and I said, thank you for reminding me why I don't want to trade with you. And then you instantly responded with an actual trade offer, which I accepted immediately.
Well, no good. I had what was, so that was a negotiation starting point. So let's put it that way.
You got lucky.
So I had what I thought was a good trade up to that point, what I was willing to give up. And being the first year in a league with you and everybody else, didn't know whose acumen was what for this game. So right away after I did that, I'm like, oh, okay, he knows his shit. Okay, I'll just give him the straight poop of what I actually can give up.
Yeah, because your second offer, I didn't adjust it at all. I just hit accept.
Yeah.
I'm like, thank you. You could have just sent that in the first place.
I was just testing the waters.
Don't need a pussyfoot around this.
So anyway, the point is, me doing that was kind of a dick move. I got to admit.
It was, yeah.
It was. Yeah. And it really could have hampered me with everybody else if Shane was that guy texting everybody, look at this shit. This is what he just tried trading me, But he didn't do that. And
it was close. Luckily, our conversation didn't end, so.
No. And now look what it's grown into.
We started a podcast.
We're in 13 countries.
But that's the thing to remember, is that you don't want to lowball so much that you just piss them off and they're not willing to negotiate with you. But luckily for Mark, I don't normally just close them off. Like, even if I hate negotiating with somebody, I'll still negotiate with them just to see if I can get my team to be better.
Yeah, that was funny. I apologize. All right. So anyway, here's one of the warning things. Do you mind if I throw this out there as a warning sign, or for people that are new to the thing and what people try to take? So there was me not knowing who I was dealing with, and I was trying to take advantage of the situation. Okay. That's going to happen to you if you're starting off. This is the one thing that people are going to tell you that and some people's strategy is, Well, I want the running back that you selected in the first round, and I'm willing to give you my wide receiver I selected in the first round. So their philosophy is going to be, well, I'll trade you first round for first round. And that is not a good thing. In the surface, especially if you're new to the game, you think that's a good thing. But it's not, because player evaluation is different from first round. A first round running back has a higher evaluation than a first round wide receiver, because there are so many more valuable and viable receivers in the league than there are running backs. So that's not a fair evaluation. Someone's going to try it on you, though. That I guarantee you, that if this is your first year playing, second year playing, if you've played it before, someone's tried that on you, and you might have fallen for it. Or if it's your first year going to play this year, it's going to be the first time you're doing it. I promise you, that one's going to be a try it out on you almost immediately. I'll trade you for my first round pick or my second round pick for your second round pick. No. You have to look at position, because running backs are such more valuable than a wide receiver is, as far as what rounds they're selected in, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And not only that, the value of all the players change within, a couple weeks into the season, when you realize, oh, that guy shouldn't have been drafted in the first round, or that guy, why was he going in the fourth? He should have been a second round pick.
And that's a great thing to come back at a guy if he tries that on you. Hey, don't try dumping your mistake off on me. You never should have selected him in the first round. This guy should have been a second or a third round pick, so I'll give you my third round pick. Just flip it on him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we'll talk about multiple player trades. These are some of the boldest trades you can do when multiple players are changing teams. It can shift the league completely. They're very exciting to do, and they're also extremely risky. You only want to pull this kind of trade if you really like the other players and find them worth the risk. It's just that, like, when you trade like 4 stars for 4 stars, your team is completely different for the entire season. It's just really, really risky, and you typically see it in early in the season. Not sure why people do this, to be honest, but
I
I
think
do see it, and it changes both teams for the
Yeah.
whole year.
I think basically what you're seeing here is buyer remorse on two different teams, that they really didn't like how their draft came about, and they're looking at it going, wow, I messed up in this particular area. I didn't have to do this. I should have done that. And they're finding someone else in the league that's feeling the same way about their team. And they're like, okay, well, let's mix up this juju and start fresh.
Hmm.
For something like that, you definitely need two teams that have drafting remorse.
Another one is multiple players for one player. If your team has been completely torn apart with busts and injuries, then maybe it's a good idea to trade your star player for a handful of players, just so that your starting core can produce more points otherwise, while also providing your team with more depth. We don't typically recommend doing this. It's mainly if you have one star player on your team. This guy is the only one that's producing for your team. Everyone else is garbage. You can easily replace them all with people in free agency. So what you do, if that star player is getting you those 20 points per week, and then you trade them for like 3 or 4 players that overall you're now outproducing your old team. That's the only way it would work.
I know you've done this too.
Uh, Not on the receiving end of multiple players.
No, you've done it the vice versa, where you've gotten the star player by giving
Yes,
away multiple players.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of my it's a favorite trade of mine. So my strategy for years have been doing whatever it takes to trade for these star players. And these star players can outproduce other players and give you a huge advantage over your opponents. While trade away some of your depth won't hurt you too much, because you can always replace those with players in free agency. So if a team is struggling and they're in the bottom half of the league and their star player is on a bye week. It doesn't have to be their star player, but one of their much better players is on a bye week. And you have a player that is not as talented, but is similar and is not on a bye week. If you can take the hit of not starting that player that week, like let's say you have somebody on your bench that could play, it's a really strong idea, good idea to pull off that trade, because after that bye week, you now have a starter for the rest of the season. Now your team is looking much better if you can take the hit for that 1 week. It's like you're taking the hit for that other team, but gaining a better player overall.
So this is a good strategy. I would assume if the team you're trying to get is like right at the 500 level, possibly could make the playoffs, but by dropping a week would really put them in a bad situation. I'm not making the playoffs. So you're kind of feeding off their desperation of knowing they need a victory.
Mhm.
Okay.
One of my favorite trade strategies is, going for that star player, and a really good way. It's hard to trade 3 or 4 players for a star player, and for most teams, I'd say it's really situational. Like they need all that depth. But one way that does work for me, especially later half in the season where you don't need as much depth on your team, is that you take one of your starters, let's say someone in your flex position, and then you take one of your best bench players and you tie those 2 players for a superstar in somebody else's team. Now, you're losing, someone off your bench, which, when you get to the playoffs, like I said, you're not using those guys on the bench, but you can also replace them with someone in free agency that you might have been keeping an eye on. And I think that's a great way to get a step up over everyone else, and a better way to gain as many superstars on your team as possible.
And that's what Shane's saying is stars are what win championships.
Hmm.
If you don't have the stars on your team, you're not going to win the championships. You could be as balanced as you want, but if you don't have those stars that can just have those huge weeks, it's hard to win a championship. So these are some of the strategies that Shane has used, that I've used, some of the things to look out, the pitfalls to look out for. We just want you to recognize when someone's trying to take advantage of you. We're trying to get you to recognize what the value of a good trade is. You want to be able to do these things. You want to have reputation of people wanting to work with you. But yeah, I think some of the points Shane brought up, especially when you're talking about trying to get star players and or a way to do it, really listen on that, read up on that, start watching the signs. Listen, you want to listen, guys. You want to listen to what we're saying on our weekly about waivers. You want to listen to what the tea leaves are saying, what the coach speak is saying, read into it. You want to look at other people, the beat writers for the different cities, what they're saying about the team, with the coaches, or what they've been asking the coaches, what the coaches' answers are. These are the things you need to do to be successful, because having a great draft strategy is fantastic. You can draft a great team or a very good team, but if you don't know how to follow it up by looking at the waiver wire, how to work the waiver wires, how to trade players, if you're not able to do that, it doesn't matter what team you've drafted, because things happen throughout the year. If you don't learn these basic strategies for waivers and trades, you're in trouble. It's plain and simple, you're going to be in trouble. So we appreciate you listening in. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Shane, what you got?
The draft is pretty much half of your team, and you should always be continually trying to improve your team, unless you just happen to have the luckiest draft ever.
And no one gets hurt.
Yeah, but I've seen there's someone in our league. I'm not going to name him, and he does a pretty good job during the draft. And every year, like his team, like overall, is just really solid, like including the bench. But it like pulling a trade with that guy is like pulling teeth. Like it's so difficult, and I try to explain it to him. Like your team will be better. Like just think about it. Like you need to pull these trades, and he's just afraid of getting ripped off, I guess.
Has he ever won the league?
No,
Okay. Just checking.
he's never made it in the top 3. He's never placed.
Yep. And that's what we're saying. Seriously, the draft is only 50% of your league, 50% of your season. The draft's 50% of it. That's it.
Mhm.
And I've seen, look at me in my one league last year. The team that I got me through the playoffs, only 4 guys on that starting lineup were ones that I drafted.
Yeah. I feel like I nail the draft every year, and then at the end of the season, because we're in a keeper league, I go through who I drafted and who's still on my team, and I'm like, oh wow, and I'm like, bust, 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 injury, bust.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that guy's not gonna be worth it next season. And it's just like, wow, I'm so glad I pulled off the trades and
Yep.
waiver wire moves.
See, now I think I'm really good at waivers. I think I'm really good at looking at players, starting to see the signs of when they're going to start breaking through. You're better at trades than I am, for sure. I'll tell you that.
Well, I'm obsessed about it, so
Yeah.
and I don't stop.
I know. That's why you led our league in transactions. We
Yeah,
we could have put a whole kitty together on transaction fees just from Shane.
yeah, yeah. That was a transaction machine. This is all we have for you on this episode. Next week will be our final episode of Fantasy Football for Dummies by Dummies. It'll be about draft strategies, which we think is going to be the most important episode to listen to.
Yeah, so tell your friends to listen in on it. And again, we've done the mock drafts. We've done 4 mock drafts leading up to this to try different strategies, to show you different strategies on why certain things, if you select players in a certain order, why it doesn't work. We've done this for a good reason. This next week, we're going to show you what we think is the best draft strategy and how to go. So yeah, I mean, it's good information. If you have friends that play in leagues, maybe not the same league as you, but you have friends that play, have them listen in.
And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.